Welcome to Lesson 6 in a C# from start to finish course. My name is Tim Corey, and today we're going to create our class library. So far, we've been stuck in planning mode. And I say stuck because that's how I always feel. That first thing I want to do is start writing code. And as I've stressed, planning is important and it needs to be done before we start coding. But now that we're through our initial planning, we get to actually start by opening Visual Studio today. And today we're going to look at creating our class library based upon what we've already laid out. So let's jump right in. Here we are inside Visual Studio. So we're going to create a new project. We'll select class library. We'll name this tracker library. And I call it library at the end to make sure that I know that this is a class library. I'll go ahead and set the location to the location as specified. And the solution name we will call Tournament Tracker. I'll hit OK. And the first thing I do is I open up Solution Explorer and delete class 1. And the reason I do that is because I don't want anything named the default, like 1 at the end. So instead of trying to rename that and possibly having an issue, I just go ahead and delete that. So now we have our library set up and it's ready for our classes. But what classes do we put in here? And this is the great part about having done the planning process already. We're really not thinking at this point. Instead, what we're doing is we're just retyping what we have in our planning document into actual code. Now, we still are thinking. It's just that our thought process is maybe a little bit different. Instead of thinking, what data do I need? We're now thinking, is that the right name to call it? Am I missing anything? Those type of things. And so it really speeds up the process. So I've got a printed out list of my classes and the properties in them. And so I'll go ahead and start creating those. If you have the companion guide, this is a great time to open that up and go to that page because it really helps you follow along. If not, you can reference the previous videos to see the design for our class layout and compare that to what we're doing right now. Or if you're really organized and had been taking notes, refer back to those. Next, I'll type prop, string, team name. So now I have two properties. First is a list of person, and next is a string. And that is all I needed for the team class. Before I continue, the one thing I want to do as well is initialize this team member's property. By default, this will be an uninitialized list. And I want to make sure that the very first thing that happens is we initialize it. So what I can do is at the end of the property, say equals new list of person. And this is something new in C# 6.0. It used to be we couldn't do this here. And so instead what we do is we create a constructor, CTOR, tab twice, and then say team members equals new list of person. And that's in the constructor, and so anytime this class is instantiated, it'd call this in and it would instantiate the team members property. But since C# 6, we can now just say the auto property equals new list of person. Again, that's yelling at me for the person because it's not yet created. No worries, we'll get there next. So let's go ahead and right click on the tracker library and say add class. And this is the person model. I can say public class person model. I say prop, tab twice, string, first name, prop, tab twice, string, last name, email address, cell phone number, and that's it. So now we have the person model. Notice how quick that went. And I intentionally didn't really talk through the whole thing. I just want to go through it because we've already talked through it initially in our planning step. And now I'm just putting this stuff down into actual code. And the one thing we need to address is back over here in team model, we call this person and actually person model. I'm going to change this as well. So now we have no more red squigglies. The team model has team members, which is a list of person model. And the person model has our 4 properties. And that's all for that. Let's add another class. And now we add our tournament model. We make it public. We're going to add our string tournament name, our decimal entry fee, our list of team model, entered team. You probably want this to be a new list of prize model, so it allows it. Even for that more complicated list of matchup model, it allows it. Now let's continue on and create these other models. Add class, prize model, make it public, int place number, place name, prize amount, and prize percentage. Now leave those all to their initial values. Now if you come back over here to our tournament model, we can see that prize model is now working correctly. So we can add our next class, which is the matchup model. We can make it public. Prop, tab twice, a list of matchup entry model, entries. And I'll even say right now equals new list team model winner. Int matchup round. All right, and the last one I have to do is I have to add a new class for matchup entry model. Make it public. Team competing. Score. And parent matchup. And guess what? That completes the basics of our class library. You see, when you get right down to it, the class library, once it's planned out, is very, very simple to actually build. But before we go, there is one other thing that I want to point out that we really should do. I'm going to start doing it, but I won't show you the whole thing just because it is a little bit long and tedious. And that is, we need to comment this. And I know that's not one of those steps, kind of like planning, that you're like, man, I really don't want to do that, or I'll get to it later. And here's the reality. If you don't do it now, you won't get to it. But I'm not asking you to comment this in general. Instead, what I'm asking for is XML comments. And if you've never used an XML comment before, they're really easy to use, and they're really, really useful. So for example, above this property right here, if I type 3 slashes in a row, 1, 2, 3, it gives me this little bit of XML. And it says summary, then it's a blank line, and then it has the slash summary. If you're familiar with XML or HTML or things of this nature, this right here is an opening tag, and this is a closing tag. Inside here is where you put your actual comment. In this case, I might say, represents one team in the matchup. And then come down here, and again over the score, represents the score for this particular team. And then our matchup model, I would say, represents the matchup that this team came from as the winner. Now that might be a little long, and so I could actually right here hit the enter key and put it on the next line. And notice how it added those triple slash comments and then moved one space over and then started my text. So this is called an XML comment. Now it may just look like a kind of a cool way of formatting, or maybe not cool way of formatting your comments, but there's so much more to this. Let me do a quick constructor here to show you what I mean. Let's say I create a constructor where you have to pass in a double called score, or maybe initial score. Why you do this, not really important. Instead, what's important is this actual method. If I hit triple slash comments here, I get that summary, but I also get this other line saying, here is the initial score parameter. So not only can I document the method itself, but also inside here, and this is where people get some things mixed up a little bit, it's inside like this. And so it's between this greater than sign and this less than sign. Not in here somewhere. Not in here. But you document right there. So not only can I document the method, but also the parameter. And in fact, if this was a method and it had a return type, we could also document that. And if you notice, if you open up your less than sign, I can have examples, or which exceptions get returned, or what permissions are needed for this method, remarks, see also. I can document a whole lot of other things. But again, you may say, who really cares? Or why should I use this format? Well, let's look at, if we did CW tab tab. Again, console right line, not really pertinent in this location, but pretend that it is. If I look at this right now, I see that it says it writes the current line terminator to the standard output stream. How does that method pass this information along? Well, it's by these / comments. That phrase right there, writes the current line terminator to the standard output stream, that phrase comes from the summary statement. Now, if I were to go down one level, say to this where it says bool value, notice it says value is the value to write. Where does that come from? Well, that comes from the parameter documentation for this item. Again, / comments. And that's what Microsoft does, but we can do as well if we use these same / comments. So if someone is calling this class library, instead of just seeing team competing, which may be descriptive, but this is definitely descriptive, or it should be, in telling you exactly what that is all about. We could even give an example of how to use a certain method, or even say who has access to a certain method or a certain property. So all of these things can be done using our / comments. My encouragement to you is definitely use these. So I'll go back through and add the / comments on the other properties in the rest of these models. But you don't need to watch that. Instead, let's talk about what's coming up next. In our next lesson, we're going to start building our forms. Now remember, we've already designed our forms in our planning phase, and now we're going to take those designs and create actual forms. And the first thing you may be thinking is, those forms were ugly. And yeah, they were. They were designs that were just for kind of sketching things out. Now we're going to try and add a little life to these forms, make them a little less like standard Battleship Gray forms, and give them a little bit of a modern feel. So make sure you stick around for that.